specifically the Secretary of State's website. That's where you can go online and look at the Missouri Constitution. I used to issue those out all the time, hard copy, but I really don't think the students read them. I mean, they're nice paperback books, but I think a lot of my students just don't read them. But this gives you, the website is www.sos, Secretary of State.mo.gov. If you go to that website and go under the drop-down link for publications, the publication, the first one will be the Missouri Constitution. Bless you. And so that's where you can find the Missouri Constitution online. Again, that's, I'll try to cut and paste this and put it on Blackboard or something so you can have it in case you write it down wrong or something, but anyway, that's the website. You just click on that Missouri Constitution, it goes right into it. It's a PDF file. You won't need to print this thing out or anything. I mean, just this, along with the study guide and my superior lecture, will be what you'll need for the final exam of the Missouri Constitution. By the way, I just kid when I say things like that. I want you to know that I'm not bragging right now. I'm not a bragging type of person.
Does the department have any of the constitutions, the little books left in the department?
I've got some in my office. Okay. If you think you need a hard copy, I don't only have about a dozen. Okay. But if you think you need one and this is not sufficient, please come by my office and I'll give you a hard copy of one. If I need to get some more hard copies because this isn't sufficient for a large number of people, I'll order some. I was just wanting to do it this time by demand. So, any questions about this, where the location of the Missouri Constitution is? Okay. Okay, over the weekend, I got several emails from students wanting to know the Connect website address. And so that kind of told me that we're not quite there yet as a whole group. So I got 3 sections, I got 120 of you, approximately. And before I issue the first homework assignment, I want to make sure absolutely everybody has been able to successfully get on Connect and do that. If you have not done that, if you have not been successful in getting on, signing on to Connect, you need to come and see me personally so we can get this thing settled once and for all. We can't let this drag on any longer. This afternoon by 5 o'clock, I will be issuing the first assignment that I would ask you to complete by Friday night. So you've got all week to do it. It'll probably only take you maybe 30, 45 minutes to do it in the first place. But you'll have all week to do it. But the assignment will be issued this afternoon, probably by 5 o'clock, and it'll be due no later than 5 o'clock Friday afternoon. So you'll have the better part of 4 days, 5 days to do it. Also, just as a friendly reminder, this is the last day, midnight tonight, this is the last day for you to take the pre-test that's on Blackboard. Now, a lot of you have taken it. But just as again, as a friendly reminder, if you look at the syllabus, if you need a copy of the syllabus because you weren't here the first day or so, I'll give you one. But the pre-test needs to be taken in order for you to take the post-test to get credit for extra credit possibilities. You can get up to 15 extra credit points if you max the questions on the post-test at the end of the semester. I will tell you also that I'm toying with the idea of some extra credit opportunities for you in addition to that. But because I've changed the quizzes to just completing the homework assignment, you're getting 5 points, and you do all 10 of them, you get 50 points. You're almost assured of 50 points right there just by completing the assignments. So so I think I've been pretty generous on the points in this course so far, the way I've got it structured. But in addition to that, I'm considering extra credit if you'll attend the Egyptian semester lecture down in Corley Auditorium. How many of you are aware of Egyptian semester taking place this year? This is a brochure that's on the wall over here. They're located throughout campus. I'm sponsoring a Egyptian Army Lieutenant Colonel that'll be here lecturing on the 30th of September. I think he has a lecture at 11 o'clock down at Corley Auditorium. Then he has another one at 12 o'clock.
He has one at 9 too.
Pardon me?
I thought he had one at 9.
No, I think he's
Okay.
11 and 12. But he's going to be talking about what happened in Egypt back in the winter, about what this means. He's also going to, but before that, I think his first lecture has to do with everything that's happened in Egypt up to 2000, the year 2000. Then he's going to talk about what happened between 2000 and today. And so that'll be very interesting. I had the opportunity to visit with him and his family at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas last spring, or in June, I should say. Really a great guy. I think you'd really enjoy listening to him. He is the youngest lieutenant colonel in the Egyptian Army, and he's very, very sharp. He's a special forces guy. He's already been a battalion commander, I mean not a battalion commander, but commander of several units in the Egyptian Army, and he's on the kind of the fast track for senior rank in the future. So he's a really, really good guy. I think you'll enjoy him. Okay, we left off with talking about Hobbes on Friday. We need to pick up with John Locke now. John Locke, Hobbes, we talked about had the thought that people are selfish. People cannot be relied on to cooperate with each other because they have their own selfish interests in mind. They need to have somebody mitigate arguments, disputes, and that type of thing. So there needs to be this central entity, and people are just not trustworthy enough to get it done themselves. Well, Locke's a little bit different. John Locke says people are born naturally free, and no one can control another without that person's consent. And so we're all born free. That's not the way it's always been, but that's what John Locke said it should be. And for us to be governed by somebody else, we need to give our consent in order for that to happen. What do you think about that idea? That is to maintain order, right? So we can't go around maintaining order on everything ourselves. So a whole mass of us needs to necessarily perhaps give up a certain amount of our freedom to some entity that will make sure that there is control in society. People place themselves under control of a government because of the mutual advantages it offers its citizens. We do it because it's in our best interest to do so. Majority rule provides a reasonable basis for making decisions, and decisions reflect the consensus of most citizens. Majority rule. I mean, that's always been kind of a peculiar way to make decisions in our society. When we used to play playground games, how many of you ever played games on the playground at school? Red Rover, or you want to play pickup game of softball or volleyball, and you have these two team captains, and they're out there choosing the players they want because and you're always the last player to be selected. Maybe you weren't, Renee, but because Renee's a good college volleyball player, but some of us were. So you were always selected based on some kind of a decision. Then majority rule, running for class officer, or being whatever. It seems like the majority kind of makes the decisions, and we get acclimated to that, socialized to it, if you will, at a very young age, and how we're selected to participate or not. So that's kind of what we do. What would be a more reasonable way of making decisions in a large society. There's probably not a better way. I don't want you to get confused with regard to majority rule with regard to electing our president. We're going to talk about the majority of the population called the popular voting, and then you could win the popular vote, but still lose the presidency, because you also need to win the electoral college. So we'll talk about two majorities or one majority you have to win the electoral college majority. You have to get 270 votes, and so that's a different type of majority, but it's still a majority rule nevertheless. Governments derive authority from consent of those who form them, and only holds its citizens' allegiance if it protects their life, liberty, and property better than they can themselves. That's why we have to have this visualization that our government is legitimate. If we do not look at our government as being legitimate through the lens of life, liberty, and protection of our property, then we're not going to have much respect for our government, are we? So life, liberty, and property are basic rights, John Locke says we have, that we want to protect. And to the degree that the government helps us in protecting those rights, we'll let the government protect those rights for us, because we can't go around protecting our rights all the time. It'd be chaos. So here's a comparison between Locke and Hobbes, kind of a two-up study chart. People are self-interested, but not selfish. We all have an interest in what we want to do in life, right? We want to be a doctor, we want to be an engineer, we want to be a teacher, or whatever the case may be. We have that interest for ourselves, but we're not necessarily selfish. We believe in the goodness of man. We believe in being our brother's keeper. We want to take care of those who can't take care of themselves. And so that's kind of where, Locke has this idealistic viewpoint of what humanity is like. Hobbes, on the other hand, people are naturally competitive and selfish. Get out of my way, this is mine. I mean, that's kind of the way it is. I have that view of certain people that live in certain communities in our United States, that they're just kind of, usually they're ones that pass you on the highway, honking their horn, get out of my way, and they're going 90 miles an hour, you're going 75, and they still want you to get out of the way. So. Is that a terrible analogy? Generally cooperative except in times of scarcity. Obviously that turns you into a different type of a person. When you're down to your struggling for your basic existence, it may turn you into somebody that you're not normally. So you can feed your family, clothe your family, protect your family. But Hobbes says not only in scarce times, but in all times, there's a general distrust of one another. Well, that's a pretty cynical attitude to have. One of my students asked me to define cynic last week, and I would say that's rather cynical. What is needed is an arbiter of dispute in interpreting the rules of natural justice to help secure rights to property and other. Locke thinks that gives order, only because there's so many people in society that there needs to be some mitigating authority. But it's for different reasons than what Hobbes is advocating for. Competition for limited supplies of material possessions. So everybody's so after that because they're selfish and they distrust each other and they're competitive that they need somebody to mitigate it. So they're saying that mitigation, that central authority, is there for different reasons. And then people have three basic rights in nature: life, liberty, and property, according to Locke. And Hobbes says the natural condition of humans is a state of perpetual war, of all against all, where no morality exists and everybody lives in a constant fear. Of these two bottom points, which one do you agree with the most? You'll be shocked probably to know which one I agree with. You agree with Locke. Anybody else? I agree with both of them.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I agree with both of them in this instance. I don't necessarily agree with both of them coming down to this point, but from here down I agree with both of them. Because if you think about our history, not only the history of the United States, but the history of the world, the normal state is a state of war. people are always at war with one another. Peace is that period of time between wars, instead of vice versa, that war is that time between peace. But really, in reality, based on history, peace is that time between wars. Wars is the norm. So we go to war because of scarce resources, because of selfish reasons, because of competitiveness, whatever. Anybody agree with that? So I tend to agree with both of them down here at this bottom level. Why should you study American democracy now? The authors ask us. Well, how has technology changed politics? When our framers are the people who framed the Constitution in 1787, when the framers drafted the Constitution, we had no technology other than the printing press. That's really all the technology we had, was the printing press. It was very inefficient. Arguably, only the elite of society would have paid for a paper to read, and they may have thrown it down on a park bench, and then somebody else who couldn't afford a paper come by and just happened to read it. So only about the upper third of society would really know what was going on, and they would be always behind times, because the press was there's always a lag time between the event and the time the paper came out or got distributed. So democracy has changed significantly since 1780. I mean, the technology with regard to our politics has changed significantly since 1787. The Pony Express, as a for instance, only existed for 18 months, and it originated in St. Joseph, Missouri, and went westward, but it only existed for 18 months. Why?
Telegraph?
Telegraph was invented, and it actually put the Pony Express out of business just when it was getting started. So technology affected communications back in the 1800s in that regard. As far as how to contact the age group of 18 to 32-year-olds, well, Howard Dean found out back in 2000, who was an unsuccessful candidate for president, that he could access that age group by the internet. And a lot of us older guys hadn't really caught on to the internet phenomenon all that much at that point. But the age group that was in high school and graduating high school, going into college, was using the internet a great deal. Barack Obama, in 2008, maximized the benefits of the internet. That's how he raised the most money, and very quickly, I might add. So technology affected the political outcome of the election in 2008 for the most part, because of the way that the internet was used and the way they were able to reach a large segment of the population that had never voted before. You turned out in a you that are in the age group of 18 to 32-year-olds, turned out in a very high number, more so than ever in history, in 2008 to elect our president. Because he knew how to contact you. Twitter, Facebook, email, whatever. And the other candidate just didn't do it very well. His campaign wasn't successful in that regard. Did you have something?
The TV affected the campaign for Kennedy, and
it did, absolutely. Well, exactly, and that's a very good point. If you remember the Kennedy-Nixon debate, which none of you do, and I barely do, because I was only, 4 years old. But I do remember this young, dynamic, good-looking guy named John Kennedy. And he was up against this craggy, old, ugly guy named Richard Nixon. Kennedy put makeup on because he knew it would make him look better on camera. Nixon didn't put makeup on. And when the TV cameras came on, it had a pale-faced Nixon sweating profusely, looking like he was old, tired, and scared to death. next to this young, charismatic, good-looking Kennedy guy, and it was very much a comparison and contrast, and technology basically showed these two gentlemen in totally different lights just because of their appearance. So that's a good point, very good point. The political context now as compared to during the framers' time. I'm going to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, you think there is negative advertising or negative campaigning taking place now between candidates? It pales in comparison to the slamming that took place back in the 1800s. Oh, it was vicious. There were duels fought over words. I mean, they shot each other. But what they would generally do when they wrote editorials, they would write with a synonym or an anonym. They would do it anonymously. Today, everybody kind of knows who's doing what, but back then they wrote anonymously. They do that a lot on blogs though, right? You go on a blog and they still do anonymous postings. But we have different circumstances now than we did back then. We were new country, we were a growing country, we were in our infancy. Now we've kind of matured out, we're involved in the world stage, not just so much what happens in North America. We've got all these different, the size of government has grown. We had 3 departments in the original structure in the executive branch. Now we've got 14 or 15 departments. Civic engagement, acting on your views. Back then, a lot of members of society didn't participate in government. A third, when we issued the Declaration of Independence, a third of the country, a third of 4 million people, a third of the country wanted to separate from Great Britain. A third of the country did not. They were Tories. They were referred to as Tories. They wanted to remain loyal to the crown. So a third of the country did not want the Revolutionary War. And the remaining third, which largely lived in the western part of the 13 colonies, didn't care. Does that sound familiar? Yeah. So only about a third of the population was really excited about this breaking away from the crown idea. The other 2/3 were going to be problematic, either didn't care or didn't want to change the status quo. So we had civic engagement going back several centuries now as far as who's involved in what for what purpose. Voting turnout by age from 2000 to 2008, again 18 to 24-year-olds. As far as the green, in 2000, about 31%. But you'll notice in 2004, the 18 to 24-year-olds voted a little bit more here, and in 2008 they voted pretty high. So between 2000 and 2008, relatively speaking, that percentage went up pretty significantly. The 25 to 44-year-olds stayed pretty flat. They went from 50% to a little over 50% turnout. And then the 45 to 64-year-olds actually kind of fell off a little bit. And then the 65-year-olds plus, they stay pretty high as far as percentage turnout. But you can see that this younger group, 44 and less, turned out just enough more voters in 2008 to have made a difference in the election outcome. Let's look at what happened in these years. 2000, we had 2 people running for an open seat for President of the United States. We had
Al Gore.
Al Gore and who else?
George Bush.
George Bush running each other for president. So there was an open seat election here for president. What happened in 2004?
Bush.
I think it was after the Trade Center bombing.
Is that the Trade Center bombing? But Bush was running for re-election, so it wasn't an open seat. John Kerry had gotten the Democrat nominee for president. So Bush pretty much won that re-election pretty easily over John Kerry. But as far as these are just percentages. So we see a pretty significant change in this group turning out in 2008. And that group pretty much elected Barack Obama President of the United States in 2008. That made the difference, because you'll notice that the other groups were not significantly different. So where do you stand? I'm interested in following politics. Oh, I can just see you're chomping the bit on that one. Don't be ashamed, or don't be embarrassed, or don't be inhibited about answering that question. I'm really kind of interested to know. And let's just be honest with each other. I mean, because I hope that by the end of this course, you're at least a little bit more interested in what happens in your government and why political actors behave the way they behave. I'm not talking about in bathroom stalls and calling pages and doing all that. I'm talking about how they behave in the legislative or the political process. Let's don't worry about all that other junk that happens that gives them a bad name, by the way. But who's interested in politics? Well, let's raise them up so I can see. I mean, seriously. Some of them, yeah, some of them are like this, and some of them are like this, and some are like this. Who doesn't care? You're not going to offend me. You don't care. That's fine. Well, when I was 18 years old, I probably didn't care either. When I was 20 years old, I probably didn't care. But not really. When I was 16 years old, when I was like a sophomore in high school, I went to Southwest Missouri State University, which is now Missouri State University. And I went up there for the sole purpose of buying a political science book at the bookstore when I was 16 years old. No, I wasn't a geek or a nerd, I don't think. I mean, I was a jock, I hauled hay, I played sports, I did all those things. But I just, for some reason, when I was 16, I just took a notion I liked politics for some reason. But I kind of faded off of that. When I was 18, I was married. I was just trying to take care of my new wife, young wife. And so politics kind of took a back seat. And so I really could care less about politics, even though I never really did lose the interest in it totally. And so when I was, for about 7 years, when we were living in a dismal state of poverty, I might add, until about when I was 25, when things started looking up, because I got commissioned as second lieutenant in the Army and all that stuff, I started getting re-energized about politics at that point. Ronald Reagan was just elected. My uncle went to work for him in his administration, and I got interested in politics again, and I've kind of been interested ever since. So a lot of people just flat don't care because all they're a bunch of crooks. I can't influence them. They're going to make the decisions the way they want to. I don't have any influence, so why should I even